Have you ever wondered why and how innovations are created and how every single innovator or creator have the same thing in common? While making my research, I first found these very characteristics about all creators in Genesis chapter 1, where God created the heaven and the earth, obviously. And I've read this chapter, I can't say billions of times, but that would be like over exaggeration. I've read this countless of times and I never understood it. Up until recently, then the thing started making a lot of sense to me. The text of Genesis chapter 1 verses 1 to 4 holds the secret. It is a simple but a very complex text. And today, this is what I'll be doing is explaining the text and how it relates to innovations and how you and I can make use of this wisdom so we can create the next innovations for the world, because the world is yearning for new innovations. I'll read from here. Genesis chapter 1 verses 1 to 4. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The earth was unformed and void. Darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovered over the surface of the water. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw the light was good, and God divided the light from darkness. Let's start the explanation from verses 2 to 4. Verse 2 goes like this: The earth was unformed and void, darkness was on the face of the deep, the Spirit of God hovered over the surface of the water. Let's explain that part there. God created the heaven and the earth. He said the earth was unformed and void, and darkness surface of the deep. Why was the earth unformed and void? Because we can see in verse 4 that whatever God creates is good. Whatever He creates was good. So if God created the heaven and the earth, the heaven was good, the earth was no good. That doesn't make any sense. When we go into like the book of Ezekiel and we find some of the secrets in the book of Revelations, we found out that Satan was casted into the earth, and what did he do? He destroyed all the former inhabitants of the earth, which science can prove that this earth has been destroyed before, aside from the flooding that happened about 4,000 to 4,500 years ago. That there is something that's already happened to the earth way past that, and you can see that through the bones of like dinosaurs and some creepy big creatures that we can find their fossil stuff on the ground. If whatever God created was good, then something corrupted it, and God had to like I have to remake. I can't say remake. I have to restore the earth back to its former form to host my new intentions, which is to create man. Because God actually does feel like recreating the earth without putting somebody in charge of it. So when He thought about man, He thought about restoring the earth, which is another topic for another day. But I'm here to talk about the concept of hovering. Now, I said the Spirit of God hovered over the surface of the deep. Firstly, we were never told for how long He hovered over the surface of the deep. But what we know was, after His Spirit hovered over the surface of the deep, His Spirit found light. Then God spoke it into existence. He said, "Let there be light." Since God can't walk like with His hand, He speaks things into existence. That is His own form of walking. He rested after 7 days, and we can see that after that. So now, if we were to connect some dots, we can see that the Spirit of God is the mind of God, and the Spirit of God is also in charge of making decisions, right? That makes a lot of sense. So God's Spirit makes the decisions, then God Himself speaks it into existence. So if we are to bring that into innovation, let's say there is a problem. The world is experiencing heat, like there's an heat wave. Then somebody was thinking, how can we reduce this heat? They said, okay, right, every house or every home will get a fan. Or we cannot say fan because in whenever you get a solution, it does not have a name. It's you that gives the solution the name. So like, okay, if we can create a way that every household has something that blows cold air, they won't experience the heat. And this cold air can be big and also can be small, that can be fitted into any place, from like cars, maybe bicycles, homes, rooms, toilets, bathroom. They were like, that's a very good idea. So automatically the person speaks it into existence. His own speaking into existence is working hard to bring that thing into life. And if we are to move to verses 3, we say that God said, let there be light, and verse 4, he said God saw the light and the light was good. The reason why when God saw the light and he saw the light was good is that the light that was created was exactly, it served the purpose of defeating the darkness. So for example, Henry Ford, when he created, I think the first model of the car, I think, is it car? Yeah, I think car. Yeah, is it car? I don't remember. But when he first created the first model of cars, I would just use car or vehicle or whatever the name is, or automobile for the tush ones. He didn't like it. He had to discard it and do it again. I think he discarded about 3 or 4 models before he found the one that he really liked, and he called that one good. Then he spread it out to the public. That's why as he became a legend. So until once you have created something and that something serve the purpose to solve the problem, which is the darkness, you cannot call that thing good. You cannot call it good. So now with this verses 2 to verses 4, I'm still coming back to the verse 4 because there's also one more important secret that is there. We can now go back to see that he said, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. So which means the heaven was good and the earth was good. Something corrupted the earth. So now in verse 4, something interesting happened there. He said God divided the light from darkness. What does this mean? God separated or divided the light from darkness. It's a form of advertisement, because if God actually removed the darkness entirely, you won't know the usefulness of the light. So for example, if there is a cure to make sure that this world never experience heat anymore, you won't know the usefulness of a fan. You won't know the usefulness of a fan. You won't know the usefulness of AC and different stuff that is used to make sure the body is kept, I can't say cold, but cool. So the reason why God separated the light from darkness is a form of advertisement. So whenever you have created light, which is solution, you advertise such solution. You advertise it aggressively. You show people, this is this problem, this is this darkness, and I have the solution, which is this light. E-commerce, that shows that that's the importance of e-commerce. So you show them, okay, this is light, this is darkness. You separate it. You show them the distance between light and the darkness. Once you have this my particular product, forget this problem, you are not having it. So if you don't have a mobile phone, you are going to have a problem of not having a mobile phone, which is you won't be able to communicate easily, you won't be able to send message easily, you won't be able to send emails easily. If you don't have a SIM card, basically you might not have the ability to call easily. I know there are features like WhatsApp and the other, but for you to even use WhatsApp and Telegram and some of these social media apps, you need to have a mobile SIM that is connected to you. So if you don't have a mobile SIM, you will have the disadvantages. You have the problem of not having a mobile SIM that is dividing the light from the darkness. So whenever you have a light, you have a solution. You divide the light from the darkness. You show the distance to the water. This is light, this is darkness. So God called the light morning, He called the darkness night. So you call your solution the name, and you call the problem a name too. So now the word heat means when you say that there is heat, or you're uncomfortable, the weather is uncomfortable, that means it's very, very hot. They call it that is heat, right? The word heat was given to the name like when something is not favorable. Like I'm not really good with English, so don't blame me, please. I just gonna beg you. So when something is uncomfortable, you call it like you say heat. So heat was given to a name of a problem of when there is extreme heat or when the weather is way too hot. Now, to solve the solution, it was also given a name, which is either you call it fan, you call it AC, or some people will call it like if it's something like Apple, they can call it Pro Cooler, something like that. So that is it. You give the problem a name, you give the solution to a name. So it's just like a way of you dividing the problem from the solution. And when the problem has been separated from the solution, that is when money comes in. So a very good example of when God separated, another time when God separated, did such separation was when Christ died for the sin of the world. And the sin was a general problem. The whole world had it. So when Christ died, he solved the major problem, a worldwide problem. So Christ got a name above every other name. Right. That was the result of him solving such a problem. When there was issue with using, for example, with the rise of Microsoft Windows operating system, it solved a very big problem. It solved a very big problem. And what followed it? Massive recognition for Microsoft and a lot of revenues and a lot of investors rushed in. So the bigger the problem, because problems are divided into multiple phases. There is personal problem, there is community problem, there is national problem, there is international problem. Maybe two or more countries are having the same problem, and there's a worldwide problem. So the bigger the problem you solve, the more money, I can't basically say money, but the more things you get in result, because there are some things that you may not basically get more money for. Example was something like what Martin Luther King did. I'm not sure basically he got more money, but recognitions and some other things coming, but you're also going to get value in return for solving a problem. So this is the rule of innovation. I call this the hovering over the surface of the deep. I call it hovering, or the concept of hovering, the breath of innovation, because God's spirit hovered over the surface of the deep. We also, our spirit or our mind to hovers over the surface of a problem, and God hovered over the surface of the deep, not to sink into the deep, but to find a solution of eradicating the problem of the deep, or eradicating the deep, or eradicating the problem. So the problem we humans make, because we're created in God's image and we act like God, or we do things like God, is we sink into the problem. We sink into the problem. And once you stop hovering over something and you be into that thing, that stuff becomes bigger than you. You are trapped in it. For example, somebody that is outside of a stadium cannot get lost inside the stadium. Same goes to a forest. Once you are inside the forest, you can get lost inside of a forest, but you can never get lost outside of a forest. So don't ever make a mistake whenever you see a problem that you want to solve. Do not ever try to sink yourself into the problem. Your mind should be on solving the problem and solving it alone. And once you have found a solution, don't take 24-hour break. It's either you start writing it down or you start working on it immediately, because this is something that happens with solution. Once you receive an inspiration for a solution, the solution is being broadcasted into other people that is also hovering over the surface of the deep. So as many as those that are hovering over the surface of the deep, if you are the first person that gets the answer, like you get the solution, nature broadcasts it to other people too. It tells them, we have found a solution for this particular problem. So it's not about the fastest man alive. Whoever solved the problem first. So I hope you have learned a very big lesson about the concept of overing. And if for you to understand this best, look at every innovation and take this video side by side. Listen to it, look at how the innovation was done. You can also pick up the Bible, look at how every innovation was done, and look at from especially from verse 2 to verse 4. You will see the exact same pattern. They solved the problem, they gave the problem a name, they gave the solution a name, and they advertised it. And for advertising it, they get something in what? In return. God created the heaven and the earth. God solved the problem of the earth being unformed and void. So God Himself was outside of the earth, that He turned the earth to a what? To a footstool. So which of this was very, or what was the biggest lessons you have learned? Or which part stood out to you the most? I would love to hear your beautiful comments. Have a wonderful day.